And welcome back to the show, everybody. Our guest today is a gentleman I've known for a long time, and he's one of the best golf writers, and I'd say now golf communicators in the business today, Ryan Ballangee. He just launched the Golf News Network. It's a streaming TV channel dedicated to the great game of golf that we all love. Right now, you can catch it on YouTube, Roku, Amazon Fire, and as we venture into 2025, it'll be on like 10 streaming services. Talk shows, tournament coverage. Ryan's at a course today in Virginia. All good stuff. Hey, Ryan, first off, great to see you, my man. I know you've been working feverishly, and I'm proud of you. You got to be excited this thing's finally off the ground.
Well, Doug, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I am. I mean, it's a 16-month project that the vision for it probably goes back even a little bit further than that. And it's really cool to kind of bring something together that involves a lot of different people. It's not just me. It's, we have about 30 different shows that are going to be available on this channel over the course of the next couple of months as we ramp everything up in full. And that's a community thing. I mean, that's something I'm really proud of, and I take a lot of pride in representing all the folks who contribute, whether that's live content, whether that's live talk content, whether that's shows they've already been producing for years. I take it very seriously that I represent those folks in everything that we do around GNN.
You know, it's interesting because obviously you're a family man first, but as you try to tackle this venture, you got the engineering hat going, you got the sales hat going, you got the PR hat. You're wearing a lot of hats. I mean, every time I talked to you over the last 18 months, you sounded like the busiest guy on the planet. And I guess in many ways you were. I mean, you were a busy guy.
I try to keep busy. I'm not very good at sitting still, and I'm not very good at not feeling challenged. And this was something I really want to. Anything I want to do in life, I feel like I got to learn as much as I possibly can, talk to as many people as I can, learn what I don't know, learn what I need to know, and then try to kind of figure out how to do it. And there are a lot of things that kind of bring this together. Great talent who create good programming, the people on the technical side, people on the ad side. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this, and you kind of have to kind of learn how to make it come together. And fortunately, there are a lot of good people that I've worked with and gotten to know and partnered with and had conversations with to kind of get to know this stuff a little bit better and at least get this thing off the ground.
Well, I follow you on X, and so do many people who follow the game of golf. And of course, you can also, Ryan has The Break. It's a golf newsletter. That's another thing you can sign on with. But you've been following the PGA Live thing like all of us. And recently you've been pumping out the ratings for the PGA Tour and Live, which really aren't great. It is golf. I mean, we know the ratings are never going to be equal to the NFL or MLB or anything like that. But where are we, Ryan, in the rift, the civil war, however you want to describe, between the PGA Tour and Live? At 1 minute it seems like a deal's on the table. Another minute, here we go. They're going to launch separate tours again next year. Where are we, Ryan? Can you tell us any inside information?
I think Rory McIlroy gave us a good idea of some things that at least he can make public about where they are in terms of progress. He's obviously been at the forefront of this in some fashion over the last 3-4 years, maybe even 5 years, if you think about the Premier Golf League concept before what we now know as Live Golf came out. But it sounds like to him the biggest stumbling block right now in anything that they do moving forward is the U.S. Department of Justice, because whatever agreement they come to, it's going to be viewed through a very critical lens as potentially anti-competitive. And to take the phrase that Jay Monahan used, the PGA Tour commissioner, taking a competitor off the board. And the DOJ has been very hawkish in terms of scrutiny for any kind of merger. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is right now. And they're going to have a lot of eyeballs on this. And I know that there are kind of pre-proposals that have been issued to the DOJ of, hey, if we do this, is that bad? Would you look at that in a negative light? So there's a lot of that, trying to figure that out. But also just point blank, and I think McIlroy laid this out very well, half the players on both sides don't want a deal. They're happy with the way things are for whatever reason, whether that's because they don't want to take on Saudi money on the PGA Tour side, or they don't want to invite 50 new players potentially back to the PGA Tour that have been playing on Live. And for the Live players, they've got a gravy train going. I mean, you make $50,000 at minimum at every event. And if you can beat 5 players, you make $120,000. So you're guaranteed a 7-figure sum if you're a pretty decent player on Live. And if that goes away as they know it, well, that's not good for them either. So I think McElroy is probably right that a lot of the people who are going to be impacted by this don't necessarily even want it to happen in the first place. And I think that's a tough negotiating position, particularly from the PGA Tour, which is supposed to represent its constituents, and that's the players at the end of the day.
Wow, it's just more complicated than anybody could possibly imagine. Hey, I wanted to ask you this because Lucas Glover is a friend, a guy who I've admired, and I love his comeback story. The 2 wins at the end of 2023 were fantastic. And Ryan, he was on his show on SiriusXM. He has the Lucas Glover show. And recently he made comments. He said, listen, all the other major sports have expanded their playoffs. Now, he's talking about team sports. But he said in MLB, NFL, NHL, more teams are getting the opportunity to be in the playoffs. And he doesn't understand why golf has reduced the number of people who have a chance to get in the playoffs. This year, only 3 events. You had to be in the top 70, 50, 30, et cetera. And then he went on to say the signature events, which are the biggest events, he said you reduce the number of players playing in those. And he said that goes against what the other leagues are doing. Ryan, agree, disagree? What do you think of Lucas's take?
I don't disagree with him. I think that there is a future for the PGA Tour, though, where there are going to be fewer all-exempt players. You know, we've got that 125 figure, and we've had that for my entire adult life of 125 players since the all-exempt tour existed. I think there's a future where that number becomes 100 instead of 125. And if you have that 100 number, I think that opens the door to do some different things, expand the playoffs, right? If you're good enough to be on the tour, why aren't you good enough to be on the playoffs? And maybe Wyndham turns into a de facto 4th playoff event where there are only 100 guys to begin with. So if 70 get into the playoffs, well, then you really have a playoff to knock out 30 guys out of the entry to that 3-event series. So maybe Wyndham gets elevated in a different way. I think that would be a good thing. And then that way, as a percentage of representation of the all-exempt tour, you have more players in the playoffs compared to when you had 125 guys that qualified. I can also see a future where the fall really doesn't have to exist the way that we know it, where it's kind of the proving ground for figuring out the rest of the top 125 after the 70 players who qualify for the playoffs. I could see a future where maybe the entire regular season just determines the top 120, or not 125, would be then 100. And that way, you know who your players are who have a card next year. Then the 70 you get in the playoffs get access to the signature events, for example. And you can expand those fields a little bit. And it sounds like that's a possibility on the table. So I think that there is still time for a very radical schedule change, deal with Live or no deal with Live, that could be more exclusive in terms of the number of exempt players, but more inclusive in the number of players who get into the playoffs in the signature events.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. And what you're describing is a scenario that the team sports do. You have a regular season and you earn your way into postseason, and kind of like the football league, the soccer league, if you're not good enough, you're going to get relegated to a lower level and you have to work your way back in. So yeah, Ryan, I mean, I think what you just described is something that I think we're going to see maybe in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I could see a world where the Korn Ferry Tour takes on even more significance. It has taken on more over the years. That now there's 30 cards available. We'll be out at French Lick for that in just a couple weeks' time. And a lot of lives changed because of the Korn Ferry Tour. And the Korn Ferry Tours responded with bigger purses. You know, there's $1 million purse every week guaranteed. There's $1.5 million guaranteed for each of the finals events. I could see a world where some of that money from the PGA Tour's fall series, the fall events, the FedEx Cup Fall as it is now, that they could wind up becoming part of the finals series, or that they could become kind of the Korn Ferry Tour, so to speak. And that instead of, 30 cards, maybe there's 50 cards available through the Korn Ferry Tour. But place more emphasis on that because that's the proving ground for younger players. That's the proving ground for established veterans who maybe have lost the opportunity at a full exempt card on the PGA Tour. And that could be a lift for that tour as well. I mean, I think we have the architecture for the kind of league that we want. I think that a lot of people want, maybe smaller at the top and bigger at that second level, but then put the resources to work at that second level too and elevate that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I look forward to it, even though it's a bit chaotic right now. I think we all like it when things are a little more settled, but maybe something positive. And I think it will ultimately emerge from the chaos that we're experiencing now. Hey, Ryan, I'm headed to Montreal next week for the President's Cup. Looking forward to it, even though I think it's a foregone conclusion. The international team is going to come up short again. I just think everything's kind of stacked against them. But nevertheless, it is an exciting week. Although, Ryan, it does get somewhat swallowed up. I mean, we're in the midst of college football, NFL, and that's the tired old argument. Golf doesn't want to go against head-to-head. But nevertheless, this event does get swallowed up, although I do think the folks in Canada are going to welcome it with open arms, and it's going to be terribly exciting. These kind of events are a big deal, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, this is going to be huge for Canada. Royal Montreal is going to be awesome. Canada is such a great golf country, and I'm really happy for them to be able to have the President's Cup once again. I will say that since 2017, the kind of nadir at Liberty National, when the Americans could have potentially won on Saturday, it has become more competitive. I mean, the Internationals had a legitimate chance to win in 19. They didn't have as much of a chance to win in 22. Awkward circumstances there for a variety of reasons, but they were competitive. And I feel like that there has been a culture change of some semblance, especially with Trevor Immelman when he was at the helm, to convince the international side that they can be competitive. They can win this thing. Do I think they will this time? No, not necessarily. But I also don't think it's going to be something with an embarrassing kind of margin either. But you did bring up a really interesting point about it being in this time of year, being in football season. I've always wondered if maybe there could be a break in the PGA Tour schedule for the President's Cup in the middle of the year. You know, July is a very interesting time. End of June, beginning of July is a really interesting time on the schedule because it's kind of the in-between dark zone between the Opens. I think it would be pretty cool to have the President's Cup at the end of June or early July and then have that move around. You're playing in warm weather. You have the peak of people's interest in golf, and that opens up some doors to go to some additional places as well. I think that'd be a good change for it.
And the other thing, Ryan, too, listen, I'm out there a lot like you are, and I'm just as friendly with the guys on the international team or the European team on the Ryder Cup and their caddies, just like I am the Americans. I find it hard to root against any of these guys. I mean, it really doesn't matter to me who wins. I think it would be exciting if the international team did win, but that's the thing about golf, right? I mean, I just don't root for either team because I like everybody involved. I guess when I go, I just root for good shots and good golf. I guess that's what I do. Is that boring?
I mean, to me, I love just in this competition in particular, I want to root for a competitive outcome, right?
Yes.
I want it to mean something on Sunday afternoon, just like we had the Solheim Cup here in the area last weekend. I want it to be in doubt on Sunday afternoon, not the known outcome by Sunday mid-morning. So that's the first thing I'm going to root for. But also, I know I'm an American, but I kind of want the internationals to win because then that makes things that strikes a chord that maybe that changes the nature of this series, which obviously has been one-sided since 1994. So I want it to be competitive, and I wouldn't be upset if the Americans wound up losing. I know they're probably not, but at the end of the day, the 12 players on the international team they're fun, they're young, they're worth rooting for and investing in.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Hey, listen, we appreciate the time. Hey, before we wrap it up, because I know you're in the midst of, again, recording stuff for the Golf News Network, what's next? I mean, you've launched, you're like Elon Musk. Your space rockets are in the sky. What's next for the Golf News Network now as we wrap up 2024 and segue into 2025?
Well, we have the 2-year anniversary for Golf News Net Radio in about a month. It's been around 2 years, it's a great thing to celebrate. But the rest of the fall is really going to be focused on getting connected to all of our streaming platform partners, getting some additional streaming distribution throughout the fall and into early 2025, and trying to get in front of as many eyeballs as we possibly can, with our goal being throughout the fall to get to about a user base of 30 to 40 million potential users. And then by the end of Q1 next year, something like 70 or 80 million. Give us a
Wow.
really good distribution and help people to discover what we're doing and all the good content that's going to be on the channel. So that's the mission, is getting in front of people. That's the big challenge here moving forward.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate it. I look forward to being just a small cog maybe in the network as we move forward. And keep up the good work, my friend. I can't wait to see you in person. I mean, we talk on the phone, and obviously I'll watch you on X and various platforms. But keep up the great work. Really, it's amazing what you're doing. You're not a one-man show. I know you have a lot of help, but you're the bull. You're pulling the big wagon. So just keep it going, my friend.
Far too kind, but I appreciate it. Thanks, Doug. Thanks for having me on.
Talk to you soon.